Today's webinar is, I think, one of the probably most important webinars you could ever watch because I'm going to teach you today about a lot of different things. But one of the things I think that you're going to take away from this, if you were to kind of look at global perspective, is how to look at your career and the decisions you make and how those are going to have long-term consequences, either positive or negative. And I'm going to teach you all about kind of how law firms work and the mistakes people make when they evaluate their careers in law firms, and also how to survive in a law firm environment and how to thrive and how to not to make career mistakes. And some of these mistakes actually can involve practicing law altogether. And so I'll talk to you about that, practice, why maybe you don't want to practice law, or maybe you should be practicing law. And I'm going to talk to you kind of about the major mistakes that I've seen people make in 25 years of practice. And one thing I'd like to say at the start is I review like resumes all day, like every day, and I've been doing it for literally 25 years. And I spend, hours reviewing them each day because I screen all the resumes that come into BCG. And because it's a business, I need to look at people and I need to decide like who's going to get a job. And because the company, will invest thousands of dollars in each candidate. And so I need to really understand like what kind of characteristics are people, what things have they done, what decisions have they made that are going to affect their careers in a positive or negative way. Just at the outset, probably 85% of attorneys are making some of the mistakes that I'm talking about today that are limiting them. And because they make those mistakes, they never really have the careers that they're capable of having. They never do as well. They're unhappy. They are just like, not and thriving to the extent that they could. And then, of course, there's the 15% that are making the correct decisions. What's interesting to me is I see so many people that come out of, for all intents and purposes, look like they're very well suited to practicing law and they have very, good backgrounds, or they've done well, but then they just suddenly make these mistakes in their career, and literally they end their law firm career sometimes within, a year, sometimes within 5 years, sometimes within 10 years. And they give up kind of on a profession or put themselves on a track where they're never really going to reach their full potential because they make these mistakes. I don't know what your background is, but a lot of times the people that make these mistakes come into the profession with too much confidence, or sometimes they don't understand the rules and they make decisions on their own, sort of through their own filters, and they don't understand kind of the filters and the ways of viewing the world that I'm going to talk to you about today and the ways of viewing the profession. And no one really teaches attorneys this. You don't learn this stuff in law school. You often don't know it when you start working in law firms. People often don't share this information. One thing that's very interesting to me as well is if an attorney goes to law school and one of their parents was a law firm attorney or something, those attorneys almost always succeed and can have very long-term careers because their parents that have succeeded, like that 15%, kind of know these things and they tell them, and the people are just kind of sail through law firms and do well. And the other 15% kind of never learn this stuff, or sometimes they are, they think that they can make their own decisions and that they're doing the right thing. And you can't make the right decisions if you don't understand these rules. So I'm going to talk about those today. I'm also going to talk about mistakes that I've made when I've viewed things in the wrong way, when I've tried to make decisions without understanding different rules. And people make mistakes. If you're really good at like finance, or you're really good at buying real estate, or you're really good at something like that, people that are really good at that understand rules that people that aren't kind of on the inside and don't have access to different types of information, they don't make the same mistakes and then they do well. So it's almost like, the whole game of finance and the whole game of real estate is really about how people know how to make decisions. They buy things at a low price, they sell them at a high price. I mean, all these sorts of things. And so the same rules kind of apply to your career, whatever in a law firm. So I'm going to teach you about those today. And honestly, like if you learn this stuff and you take notes, it could give you a career that lasts 50 plus years or more. working in law firms or even having your own firm. And if you don't understand these rules, you could, your career could end. And you can, no matter the situation you're in right now, if you understand this, you can, get into a much better situation by understanding this and then thrive. So just a couple notes, like this is a live webinar. So after I give this presentation, I will take questions and as many questions as you have, I'll take until, we're done with the questions. So if you have questions, you can, write them down or put them in the chat right now, and then I will get to them after the webinar. Okay, so what's interesting is an attorney, your job as an attorney, and people get very good at this, and they start doing it almost immediately. They're able to gather information when representing clients. They're able to understand things that clients don't understand, and most attorneys are able to, when they're representing clients, they know much more than the client. But when you're thinking about your own career, you most of the time people aren't aware of the rules that the things that they need to do to make the best decisions in their careers because while they can represent a client and understand things, they often don't understand the rules. And there's an imbalance in power. So, it's often not because, you don't have talent or you don't have a work ethic, but you make these mistakes because you lack the proper information. And so, the things that attorneys miss, they miss, what sort of prospects they may have inside of a law firm. Excuse me, they often miss whether or not the firm's healthy. They miss the strength or weaknesses of the relationships they have that they think may help them or not. They often miss, whether or not they should be moving firms or doing something different for another opportunity. And when you don't have this information about your career, you're really going to be controlled by, things that you don't even understand, and it's going to hurt you. And so my goal right now is I'm going to teach you the things that you need to do to get that control back. So the biggest problem that most attorneys face is very simple. They don't have the right information to make the best career decisions. And because they lack this information, they can't really play the game of working in a law firm. They don't understand, and I'm sure I'm going to talk to you about a lot of things today that you don't understand rules. And so if you don't understand these rules, you're not going to be able to play this game effectively. And so you lack information. A lot of times people, almost all attorneys lack proper information about jobs and hidden opportunities. So however you're looking for a job right now, you're probably missing at least 80% of the potential jobs out there. I'm going to tell you why. You often don't understand your prospect and wherever you're working. Like, is that a place where you can advance or is it a place where you can't? And that's a very serious problem. People don't often understand the health and stability of where they're working for. So stability is also related to your career. People don't understand, how to work with their peers and decision makers in firms. And then people don't understand when to move and when not to move because there are lots of circumstances when you should never move. And so all this information that you don't understand, if you do understand it, gives you power. And if you do understand it, you're going to have, a lot of advantages. I mean, many more advantages than the majority of attorneys, like 85%. And so, it's almost kind of funny because when, attorneys are representing people, they hold all the information. They can understand their clients. So clients hire them to have more information, and clients, the attorneys know the law and the risk and the strengths and the weaknesses of a client's case and so forth, and they're able to do that. But when they don't, when an attorney has that information, this gives them value because they have more information than the clients, and so they can charge clients for it and they can charge a lot of money. But with your career, most people don't have the same information. They're not able to look at their career and understand all the things that they need to do to be successful. Some attorneys understand this, like I told you, attorneys whose parents were attorneys and things, but most of the time, attorneys have no idea of the right decisions that they need to do and the things they need to avoid in order to succeed in their career. And because they don't know that, they're often much more unsuccessful than they would be if they only made some of the things like they did some of the things that I'm going to talk to you about today. And because most, I'm not saying this to be rude or anything, but the odds are very, very good that you don't know most of what I'm going to talk to you about today. and how to make the smartest decisions. And what do the smartest decisions look like? Well, if you make the smartest decisions, your income can probably be, 10 times more than you might make if you didn't. Your longevity could be much more. Your happiness could be much more. Your overall success compared to people that are smarter than you and even more motivated than you can be much more. And you can have a very good career. Anybody that goes to law school and graduates can, if you're suited to the practice of law, which I'm going to talk to you about today, can have a very good career and you can be happy. And it's something that a lot of attorneys do. But because most attorneys don't have, or even law students, I mean, don't have access to this sort of information, they're not making the smartest decisions. And those are hole in the back. It's just all about the filters, like how you view things and how you understand the world. It's interesting too. I just kind of a quick aside. One of the reasons for often going to the best colleges and the best law schools, it's not really like what you learn. It's about the people that you're surrounded with and how they view the world. And so you're surrounded by often very competitive people that know the things that you need to do, the grades you need to get, the schools you need to go to, how well you need to do on things. And so you're surrounded by people that are looking at the world with different filters. And so, if you go to a really good school, oftentimes the people you're around are looking at things in a certain way, and that's your peer group, and that can make you more successful, at least with schools, but even with law schools. I mean, you go to certain law schools and you'll learn about, different types of firms and things that you believe will give you a better career that you might not learn about in different other environments. So you go to the best schools and you try to get into the best employers often, not because often, the work you're doing or the what you're learning, but because of you're surrounded by people that often have look at the world, in a different way. So attorneys profit from having superior information to others, but in most cases, people don't have the kind of information I'm going to tell you about today. And again, this information that I'm telling you is things that I've learned from, 25 years of doing this and looking at resumes every day and just seeing all these mistakes that probably 85% of attorneys are making, that if they didn't make them, they would have, much, much longer careers. And so I'm going to talk to you about those. I'm going to talk to you about sort of the filters that you should be looking at your career with. And it's going to help you tremendously because I will give you power today to be better than your peers and to make decisions that can give you a long-term career, where you can be happy and where you can succeed. Whereas if you didn't have this information and also your life, like what do you do with your life and your career if you're unhappy? Like do you belong practicing law? Is this something, are you in the right practice area? Are you in the right type of firm? All these sorts of things can have a major impact on how successful you are. So the first mistake people make is often just being in the legal profession to begin with. So probably more than half the attorneys out there are not necessarily in the right profession. Like practicing law is not the right profession for a lot of people. And when I say 50%, I mean that's an accurate number. And I'll tell you why. The odds are you may not be in the right profession. And I'm not telling you that to be mean or anything, but I'm going to tell you, why you are and the consequences. If you're in the wrong profession, your whole life is going to be limited. Your income's going to be limited. Your self-esteem is going to be limited. Your, happiness is going to be limited. How well you take care of your children or your family is going to be limited. Your career is just going to be limited. Like you're not going to go the places that you could go if you were in the right career and doing something you were passionate and good at. You're going to never reach your full potential because people that do things that are not where they don't have the right skills or the right motivations and innate skills are never going to reach their full potential. You could be an amazing actor or something and better than 99% of actors, but decide you want to be in the legal profession where you could be an incredibly successful actor, like, and instead of an attorney. I mean, there's all these things that a lot of times people could do that would make them much more successful than if they were practicing law. And if you are in the wrong profession, I'm going to tell you why you might be in the wrong profession. You're going to be often unhappier than you would be in the right profession. You're going to be stressed out if you're in the wrong profession. Whereas, what is stress? I mean, there's different types of stress, but If you're doing something you like and there's stress involved in it, you're going to still push through because you enjoy it. And if you're doing something you don't like, that stress is just going to kind of eat you up. If you're in the wrong profession, you're definitely going to probably earn less money than you would otherwise earn if you were in the right profession. And anytime you're in the right profession, you're going to be better than other people. And if you're better than other people, there's going to be rewards that you won't get if you're not better than other people. If you are in the wrong profession, you may be unfulfilled by the work you're doing. And so the work you're doing, just to be completely straightforward with you, has to be something where you look forward to it, where where it gives you satisfaction and where you just feel good about doing it and where you don't mind doing it even on the weekends or extra hours many times because you get something out of it. Like it moves your soul. Like if you're playing sports and you really like doing that and it's fulfilling to you, well, the same sort of fulfillment should come from your job. You're spending a great portion of your day. I mean, you're spending most of your life working. So why would you do something where you're unfulfilled? And also, a lot of attorneys enter the legal profession for the wrong reasons. They enter it because they think they're going to make a lot of money, or they enter it because they want to be in a prestigious job or professional. And then once they get into it, they remain in the profession for the wrong reasons. And if you are going to succeed as an attorney, at least, at the level you're capable of, you need to make absolutely sure that you're in the right profession. I mean, people go to law school not even understanding really what this profession's about. They may see people on TV arguing in court and stuff, or they may, understand that attorneys make a lot of money. But once you get into it, you need to make sure you're absolutely in the right profession. So a lot of people think that because they're smart, they're in the right profession, meaning they're able to get good grades in college or whatever, and then they're able to get good test scores. But honestly, if you are very smart and you're good at test taking and you're good at, you get high LSAT scores and grades, it's not that hard if you get into a major law school to even, get into a major firm. I mean, most people that go to the top law schools get jobs in major firms, but it doesn't mean that they're suited to it. When I was in college, I remember there were people that in just my fraternity, I couldn't believe it. Like really smart people. Like almost everyone that took the LSATs got like in the 170s and were able to get, into good schools. But, the LSAT, basically measures how well you take standardized tests. To some extent, it is an intelligence test. The biggest part of the LSAT that tests intelligence is the game section, but lots of smart people can take the LSAT and get good grades, often just based on their intelligence, but it doesn't test your interest in practicing law and like how long you're going to do it. It doesn't test your ability to thrive as an attorney. It just tests your ability to take a test. And college grades don't really have anything to do with it either. I mean, there's some schools like Harvard and Yale, for example, that the majority, almost all the grades in the classes are A's and A minuses. And so, grades, test scores, they don't test everything. It can help you to get into really good firms, but it doesn't mean that when you do get into good firms, you're going to be happy, successful, or even good at being an attorney, because the skills of being an attorney, which I'll talk to you about today, do not have are not, you know, don't necessarily line up with, what someone that's smart or goes to a good law school does. So the other possibility is that you might not even end up when you get out of school being good at this. There's a lot of very smart people in the profession that you're competing against. So having intelligence is one thing, but being able to succeed is a different matter. Now, when I talk about success, there's different types of success. So if you don't do well in tests, if you didn't get good grades in law school, that doesn't mean that you can't succeed. It just means that you're not going to be able to succeed in getting into firms and doing work where there's high consequences. And so high consequences means, representing large corporations and matters and having to have the best attorneys on both sides. There's other practice areas like immigration and, even trust in the state to some extent, and personal injury, where there's other skills. Like personal injury, for example, is mainly about just the ability to bring in cases and then settle them. It's 95% of it. It doesn't require, a high degree of intellectual competency. It requires other skills, which are, being able to settle things and being able to bring in clients. But for the most part, if you want to practice with consequences, meaning representing decent sized companies or representing individuals and different types of litigation, you're going to have to be able to see issues that others miss. You're going to have to be if you're a litigator, you're going to have to be very good at verbalizing and documenting your findings, and you're going to have to be better than outthinking the competition. So what does that mean? What that means is when two attorneys meet in a transaction or in a case, the ones that succeed most of the time are the ones that have the ability to see things that other attorneys miss, to work harder, to outthink the competition. So if you're in a transaction and two sides are documenting something, there's going to be one side that probably gets a real edge on against the person that they're negotiating against because they're able to outthink them, they're able to do all these things that make them successful. So if you're trying to do things and you're up against attorneys that are better than you, you're going to lose most of the time or not get the best results. So is that something that you feel comfortable doing in the practice area that you're in? And, attorneys, like I said, that are the smartest, that are able to, that have the potential to succeed in the most difficult matters will get the best jobs when they come up against other attorneys. If they work hard and because of their innate abilities, they're often able to win the most cases and negotiate the better deals. And that's just how it works. When large firms go up against small firms, almost all the time, a high percentage of the time, like probably over 75%, they win and they get better results. Not always, but the majority of time. And so, if you're trying to do that and you're someone that thinks, oh, I need to get into the largest firms and things, but you have to realize that when that happens, you're going to be working with and against people that have a lot of intellectual horsepower and may have an innate ability to spot issues and to get very fired up about getting the best results in a transaction and don't miss things. And this is kind of a natural, it's about natural gifts and it's about having smarts, and it's something that the LSAT does test. And so, you're going to be up against people. You can certainly learn all this, but if you're trying to compete at a very high level in the legal profession and you don't have the ability to be better than the other side or think you can be better than the other side, then, that's something that's just going to limit you. I mean, think about it. I mean, that's just how it is. And so are you doing the right thing where you believe that you're going to get a better result than the people you're against? And it may mean not working in the largest firms or working with smaller clients, but it's something, that you should think about. And you have to be deeply interested in this. Like you have to really be interested in your practice area and you have to be committed to it and you have to, want to keep learning. And if you don't, they're going to be up against people that are committed to it, that are interested in learning, that this really gets them going. I mean, people that are motivated in their practice area, they would like to give talks about it. They would like to write papers about it. They would like to learn more about it. When I was practicing law with one of the people that I worked with at my last firm had never truly lost a case. He'd taken cases to trial, he'd always won. And then when he was up against people where he was fighting them in litigation, he would almost always get really, really good settlement terms. And I went into his office one day and he had like, I don't know, just file cabinets just all over the office. And in the file cabinets, he'd had all these, and this is before, anyway, before when a lot of the information came out of printed legal newspapers and weren't online. But he had, thousands of, little files that he'd made about different matters and things. And he's just very, very interested in it. And then I remember I was coaching this one attorney at one point that was very, very interested in privacy law. And it was the same thing. Like he, had all these, file cabinets full of like things that he'd studied about privacy law and was very good and had come from, someone that hadn't, had a good start to their career to one of the top privacy attorneys in the country because he was just very, very interested in it. And he would study it, and then he would come up against people that didn't have this interest and this deep understanding, and would win. And started filing cases against Google and things, for his firm, and became very, very successful. So that's what helped him succeed. So are you motivated that way? Like, does your practice area, the practice of law, does it really motivate you? And are you someone that is interested in this and even would be reading things about your practice area in your free time? I mean, these things are important if you want to succeed at a very high level. And, if you don't want to succeed at a high level and you want to be average, you can certainly do that. But really, you need to be interested in this. And if you're not, then just remember that you're never going to reach the level of success that people that are very interested in this stuff do. So if your goal is not to be very successful, then that's fine. But you have to realize that that's what you're up against. You're up against people that may be very excited about this. They love talking about their practice area. They want to go out and tell clients how they can help them. They like reading about it. They like talking about it. They enjoy going to work so they can learn more about it. And if you're not that kind of person, you need to think about that because that's important. In my profession, I'm giving these webinars and things and writing articles. I mean, I'm sick, I'm excited about it. And if I was doing something else, I probably wouldn't be. So I have like an interest in this. And are you interested in practicing law and what you're doing to that extent? And if you're not, think about that. I could write, forever about like kind of what makes a good attorney, but at its core, the best attorneys have a genuine interest in solving other people's problems. Like it motivates them to help other people solve their problems. They think that they have this special information, like I'm trying to help you right now solve problems, but a good attorney really is interested in solving other people's problems. A good doctor is interested in healing people and helping them. The best doctors are interested in doing it at a very high complex level, whether it's a neurosurgeon or something, a heart surgeon, but they're very interested in it. And you have to be interested in solving other people's problems, meaning you are motivated by being there for a person or a corporation and doing whatever you can to help them. If you're a good attorney, if you're a litigator, you're very interested in writing things. If you're a transactional attorney, you're very interested in documenting things and improving your documentation and improving your writing. You're interested in details and finding details, and you're interested in research and all these things. I mean, these are things that attorneys that are in the right profession do, and you either have it if you or you don't. Now, that's not to say that you could be better in another practice area that you're in that would interest you more, but you have to be interested in this, and the work has to interest you because, again, if it doesn't, you're up against people that are, and you have to actually be content, meaning this is something that you're happy doing. You have to be happy sitting behind a computer and writing and researching and not minding that you're spending 8, 10, 12 hours a day behind a computer because it's something that you enjoy. And if you are the type of attorney that it can talk to people in face to face, and you don't always have to be that type of person. There's people that just do work, but you have to actually be interested in meeting with clients and telling them how you can solve their problems and going to meetings with them. And you actually have to not mind writing down your hours and billing your time. And that would be in most law firms. Now you could be a personal injury attorney and not do that, or a trust and estates attorney or a patent attorney and not doing that, but you still have to be interested in the work and doing the work. And you have to be actually eager to do the work and often, willing to spend long hours on other people's matters to get the right results. And you have to be satisfied with it. Like you can't resent the fact that you're doing this work. You have to actually want to do the work. I mean, think about that. Why would you do a job that you resent? You're not going to get anywhere. You're going to be up against people that don't resent it. So you have to be satisfied and you have to see like, this is something I can do. I see a future in it. I want to do this. It's exciting to me, and you shouldn't resent it. And these are just, very basic things, and you have to have that to do it. You have to have some sort of charge out of the work. It has to excite you. You have to see different angles and things to it. And you have to be satisfied. I mean, you have to have some level of satisfaction or some view of the future doing this that's going to make you want to continue doing it. And this is about working in a law firm, but if you're passionate about it and you like it, then you have to envision yourself at one point, if you're an associate, being able to take your knowledge and your experience out into the world and hopefully build a book of business and get clients. Clients are attracted to people that are experts and that have passion in the work. They're not attracted to people that don't are just kind of pushing paper and don't really care a lot. They're attracted to people that want to tell them how they can solve their problems and how they can get a better result than other people and how they can do it efficiently or how they can, win or how they can help people and they're proud of it. And attorneys, by the way, for a transactional attorneys are often, the best ones are very proud of all the transactions they've done. They write them down and they keep transaction sheets. And litigators are very enthusiastic about the results that they got for their clients, and they will put them on their firm bios and things. And then as they get more senior, they like teaching other people how to do it because they feel good about the knowledge that they have and they want to tell other people about it. And they often will, dream about, how they can expand their influence, how they can just be doing one thing now, but they're going to be more influential and better at it later. And they want to continue expanding and getting better and better. And even if you want to go working in-house, I mean, some people think they don't like law firms, and there's lots of reasons that you shouldn't be working in a law firm, but it's the same thing. They want to go in-house and solve the problems of the company and be like the expert and help the company grow and avoid things. And so they still need to have that if you go in-house. And if you do, sometimes people want to go in public interest work and they want to represent the poor or help nonprofit organizations, and that motivates them, or they want to teach law and that motivates them. But whatever you do in the legal profession, it should motivate you and you should be excited about it. I mean, why would you do something that you're not excited about as opposed to something you're excited about? I mean, that's just a waste of your career and your life. And so, the common denominator in all this, whether it's a firm or working in-house, is having this interest in what you're doing. And you have to like the work and you have to picture yourself doing it, and you have to think about getting better and better at it or finding the right environment. Because if you are not interested in solving other people's problems and it doesn't motivate you, then you probably shouldn't be practicing law, because that's what attorneys do. Attorneys solve other people's problems, and they, hopefully you're someone that actually adds a lot of value and doesn't not add value to your client's problems. There are attorneys out there that consistently, even in large firms to some extent, that consistently don't get the best results for their clients and aren't enthusiastic about it, but are coasting on the pedigree of the firm and their pedigree, but they're not really motivated by getting the best results. And that's okay. I mean, sometimes people are motivated by other things, but you have to have these characteristics to really be practicing law, and you need to think about that. I mean, who would you want? And if you were being represented by an attorney, would you want someone that wasn't passionate about the work, that didn't really like it, that didn't inspire you about what they could achieve? I mean, if you think about even, the best criminal attorneys, like certain people come to mind, and those people, when they represent their clients, are giving press conferences and talking very enthusiastically about it, and that be the kind of criminal attorney you'd want. Or if you were represented by a doctor, you would want someone, if you had some horrible disease, that was passionate about it, that had studied it, that was an expert, and that's what you would want. So you want someone, that you want to be someone that's interested in solving other people's problems and takes great pride in it and feels good about that. And if you are like that, if you think I can solve this person's issue, whether it's you could be an immigration attorney or a trust and estates attorney, it doesn't matter the practice area, even workers' comp attorney, but you have to be interested in this. And if you are, then, then everything else will fall into place for the most part. I mean, you can put yourself in transactional practice areas or different types of practice areas where you don't need to be the smartest person, but you have to be passionate about to some extent. Personal injury, you have to be passionate about, whatever. And if you're more interested in something else, like you're not interested in solving other people's problems, that's actually okay. I mean, there's countless paths that could align better with what excites you. And there's certain things that will excite you. I remember anyway, talk about this a little later, but I remember one time I met this woman and she was living in this like small house in the Valley in Los Angeles and was just had this incredible passion about like real estate development and was like building these models in her house and things of these things she wanted to build and just completely excited about real estate development. And I was like, I remember talking to another guy that was very well known in the real estate industry, and I was like, this is just crazy. Like this woman is like so interested, and she was trying to get someone to give her $50 million to build this giant winery outside of Los Angeles. And I said to this guy, like, why would this woman be so passionate about it? He's like, well, it's just sometimes things just, click for people. Like it's almost genetic. And this woman ended up becoming a very successful real estate developer. I mean, she was young when I met her, I think maybe 27, 28, but it was just something that she was incredibly passionate about. And so there's certain things that you're probably incredibly passionate about. It doesn't have to be practicing law. You have to do what excites you. And if you're not interested in this, and if it doesn't motivate you and it doesn't get you excited, then you're never going to be at the top of the profession as good as you could be. And you're never going to really reach your full potential. Now, there are countless jobs in the legal profession that you can do that may not be just solving other people's problems. Like I know a very successful attorney that graduated from Harvard Law School, then he went to Gibson Dunn, he was at the top of his class at Harvard, and then he decided that he wanted to do personal injury law and not even practice personal injury law, but be someone that went out and did marketing and generated business. And that was what he wanted to do. Now, that's not necessarily practicing law, but he was motivated by bringing in clients and helping them and, makes tens of millions of dollars a year doing that. So there's all sorts of things you can do, but you're never going to be as good as other people. And, you're never going to, if you don't enjoy this, you're never going to be as good. And it's probably not something that you should be doing it. And, success doesn't require just intelligence and credentials. It requires a lot of interest. And people in large law firms, probably more than 75% of them that get jobs in large law firms, after school, don't have that level of interest. And so they're always going to fall short. And they may be doing better off doing something elsewhere or a different practice area. And the reason for that, I mean, there's a lot of reasons, but if you're in this profession, you're never going to get a lot of positive feedback. Even the best attorneys don't get a lot of positive feedback. I mean, you have to be committed because, you have to be able to thrive on your own without a lot of positive feedback and to succeed. People that need a lot of positive reassurance are almost never going to make it because, clients are always going to be unhappy to some extent with bills or results, and you're going to have to be able to push through. Superiors are often going to be very critical of your work or just competitive with you and will look for things wrong. Your fellow attorneys will be. Judges their job is to find issues and to rule against people, and they'll have negative things to say. And so you have to be able to thrive without a lot of positive feedback. You have to not need constant validation. You have to be able to have something that pushes you through, and you have to believe in yourself. And if you don't, you're never gonna be able to continue many times. And if you do find yourself receiving a lot of positive feedback, that's often a good sign. Or if you know that the work you're doing is better than others, and you feel good about that, then that's good. And if you are getting a lot of positive feedback, which some people do and some people don't, then you're probably doing something right. But the absence of praise is very normal. You have to be able to do well without it. And if you earn it, where you're getting a lot of positive feedback, that's good. But many people never get hardly any positive feedback at all. And just some examples of things you can do. I mean, there's so many things you can do. I mean, in Malibu, where I live, I know a guy that has this little store in the side of a road that's all ramshackle, and all he does is rent out surfboards, never finished high school. He lives in a multi-million-dollar house. And he said even in his worst year, that's his, fires or something, that he still made over $450,000. I mean, that's a good job where you can make a lot of money and you can do all these sorts of things. People make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year doing things other than practicing law. In San Francisco, I read about 6 months ago, the starting salary of a policeman. I mean, they're desperate for policemen in San Francisco's, you can get a job doing that when you're 18, making $200,000 a year. You may not be passionate about policing, but if you're passionate about policing, you can do very well. And then you can work as a policeman for 20 years in a lot of cities and then retire with a pension and health insurance, getting paid 80% of what you were paid in your last year. You retire at the age of like 39 or 45, and you're getting a pension of like, say $200,000 a year for the rest of your life in health insurance. I mean, there's all sorts of jobs you can do if your goal is to make a lot of money. Even policemen make a lot of money, rather than practicing law. It doesn't mean you need to be passionate. Yeah, I don't know. You might not be passionate about policing, but there's things you can do. This surf guy, even surfs a few hours a day, and he just hires, these local kids or people that want to work in a surf shop that are, slow and often stoned and stuff. But this guy has a passion for surfing, and he likes it, and that's why he succeeds. And you can do it without an education. And so there's all sorts of ways, if your goal is to make money, things that you can do that you can do that don't involve practicing law. And oftentimes, you may not even need to have this kind of extreme level of motivation if you enjoy it. And so many attorneys out there, they think that, they need to practice law to earn a good living. And I can guarantee you there's just so many things you can do where you can earn money and often do very well, enjoy it, than not practicing law. So you have to have, in my opinion, some sort of passion and interest in this. And if you don't, then sorry, then you're not going to be, as good as you can be. Now, it's important to understand also, just for law students and young attorneys, that you may not enjoy practicing law, but when you get out of law school and you start at a firm, a lot of it is just, it's almost like boot camp. You're doing work that's often not the most interesting because you're getting the lowest level work. You're getting, a lot of work that you may not enjoy. You're working lots of hours on things that are kind of at a low level, that aren't as high level as you would be when after some time. But the first few years in a firm are kind of like boot camp. It's often not that pleasant. You need to push through, but at the same time, you have to believe in what you're doing. You have to be able to get through this hazing to discover, if the work aligns with your needs. Like a Navy SEAL, for example, they have this thing called Hell Week, and they make people essentially stay up for an entire week and sleep more number than a few hours a day. And all they're doing, and very few people make it through to become a Navy SEAL, all they're doing is just separating the people that really, really want to do this from the people that do. And the people that really want to do it, something pushes them through and they do it. And the other people that don't push through, it's kind of a secret in the Navy SEALs, but when they fail, and almost everybody fails, they go on to ships for the rest of their service and do things like scrape paint and stuff. The rewards are there for the people that are able to push through. If you've been doing this though for several years, like 3 or 4 years, and you are very unsure about it, then that's often, a sign that you may be, in the wrong profession. If you're constantly questioning whether or not it's something you want to do, you're probably in the wrong profession. I remember even when I was studying for the bar exam, I was reading books about like alternatives to practicing law. Like I kind of knew when I was going into it that I wasn't probably going to be 100% committed to it. And I think I did well, not because I pushed myself, but it wasn't something that I was going to be committed to because there were just things I didn't like about it. So, if you're constantly questioning whether you should be doing this and you feel just it's not motivating you, then you're probably going to leave the profession. And it's better that you leave sooner rather than later because you're going to be, if after you have to give it at least a few years, but after a few years, if you just really don't enjoy it and you can't see yourself in a practice area that you enjoy it, then it's just you should put your effort somewhere else. And because you need to be committed. And if you don't have that conviction or the desire to push through, then, you're eventually gonna, not do well or get pushed out. And a lot of attorneys, it's very common, they'll stay in the profession because they're concerned about how they're going to look to others, like how they'll look to their peers, how they'll look to their family. They worry about what other people will think of them if they don't do it, and so they stick with it when they shouldn't. People are motivated by groups and what other people are telling them they should do, but they keep doing it and they're unhappy. And you should never do something that if you're dissatisfied with it, and more dissatisfied than satisfied. And if that's your case, that's a warning sign. And you know, caring too much about what other people think, is a problem because your career needs to serve you. It needs to make you happy. You shouldn't be relying on what you think other people are telling you should do. You shouldn't live for, what other, if others think you should be an attorney, you should be happy. So, that's a big mistake. So you may not be in the right profession. It's just something to think about. And like if you're not in the right profession probably, and you'll know very quickly. And if you're not in the right profession, I don't really understand the point of continuing to do it. It's just why? Why would you do something that makes you unhappy, that you're not going to do well at, that you don't feel like you can get the best results for your clients? I mean, it's not a good use. And you think that there's other things, maybe that you think that there's other things that you can't, that you don't think there's anything else you can do. And there's so many things you can do. I mean, I know people that sell life insurance that make over $1 million a year. I know real estate agents that make millions of dollars a year. I know car salesmen that make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. I mean, I'm talking about sales positions now, but there's just so many things if you're passionate about them. Look at all these people that become billionaires you read about all the time. I mean, they're doing something they're passionate about, and they certainly, aren't practicing law. I mean, they're doing other things. And so a lot of people, and just to be very clear also, if you go to law school and you take the bar exam and you pass it, you're obviously very motivated, but are you channeling that motivation in the right direction? A lot of people think that that what they should do is they should always take the job that pays the most money. And so, they're driven right into that. That motivates them. They take jobs, that pay the most money. They're chasing the highest paying roles, and then they're doing that without asking themselves, is this something I really want? And when you are driven by money, like if that's your primary goal, especially trying to work in the highest paying firms. A lot of attorneys that go in, I see this all the time. People start their careers at the best firms and then they just quit and or they drop out and maybe they would have been happier if they were in a different environment or a different practice area. And then often people make the mistake of jumping in house. They believe that they go in house because they're unhappy in law firms when maybe they would have been happier in a smaller or mid-sized firm. So they go in house and then that limits them because once you go in house, it's almost impossible to get back into a law firm. And so, if you're driven by money, like if that's what motivates you and that's how you evaluate your happiness and self-worth, that's may not be what you should be doing because if you want to work in a position that pays the most money, it could be for you. The lifestyle could be very demanding and unpleasant, and often the jobs that pay the most money have, the least opportunity for long-term success. I know attorneys that work at like Skadden and they work, 7 days a week and they just these incredible hours and they're never going to make partner there. And it's unpleasant. And so, they may be making a lot of money, but it's unpleasant for them. It's probably not the right thing. So one thing to also understand, if you aren't in a top firm and didn't get there, or if you are in a top firm, people think that they should work in the best possible firms and make the most money. But when you work in the best firms, for most attorneys, not all, what you're doing is you're getting the highest compensation you can earlier in your career, and you're going to work very, very hard, but you're kind of front loading your compensation because you're making a lot of money earlier in your career, but then you're going to be in a position where you have to leave that firm and you won't have clients and you won't have you won't make partner and things. And so, these jobs that pay the most money, they pay the most because they have the highest performance expectations, but at the same time you're probably never going to develop clients and it's never going to be the best possible position for you. And so the reality of the highest paying jobs is that they have the least opportunity for advancement. And so, these jobs pay a lot because there's a lot of risk. And the risk is that you'll lose your job. And most people in the largest law firms, when they get senior or whatever, they have to leave. And the more the job pays, the more likely failure is. And people think these are good opportunities, but then people go into them thinking that, they'll beat the odds and their talent will carry them. But most of the time, it doesn't work that way. It may not be because you're not a good attorney. I mean, you could be a great attorney, but you're just the odds of you succeeding because law firms do not want to make partners unless that partner has a lot of business. You're probably not going to succeed. And so, you're more likely also if you try to get into the highest paying jobs to fail than the lower paying ones. You're up against very, very smart people. You're competing against people that are maybe more motivated than you, that may have more aptitude. And so, I notice, and this is just a pattern that I've noticed throughout my entire career, and it's very interesting to me. And I think a lot of smart attorneys will actually start out in top law firms, and then after 3 or 4 years, they'll realize if I want to continue, or 6 years or 7 years, if I want to continue practicing law, then maybe I need to move to, a smaller or mid-sized firm. I saw a woman a couple of weeks ago. She was at a big firm, like I think it was Greenberg Traurig, and she was making like $350,000 a year or something and working these incredible hours. And she went and took a job at a firm that makes most of the people that go there partners, that literally most of the people leave by 5 every day. And it was paying like maybe 180 or $200,000 a year. And she made that decision because she wanted to have career longevity. She wanted to have a better style of life. She liked the work that she was doing, but she realized that probably at that particular firm, which is an awesome firm. I mean, Greenberg Traurig is a great, great firm, but she realized that her odds of success and happiness would be better at a smaller firm. So I notice this all the time, and it's incredibly interesting to me because it's such a like a profound pattern that attorneys that start their careers often in smaller firms, it could be a firm of like 20 or 30 people, it doesn't matter, or 175, I don't know, but smaller firms, they start their careers in these firms, or they start their careers in smaller markets like outside of major cities. These people that start and have their careers like that are often practicing law, 5, 10, 20, 30 years later in those markets, in those practice areas where the attorneys in the largest firms often that start there have very short careers. And so the people that start their careers or start working in smaller to mid-sized firms will often make, and actually there are statistics on it. There was a research report that I worked on for several weeks, but what we found was that attorneys that started smaller firms, smaller markets will make more money often throughout their career than the people that start in the largest firms, meaning they'll actually make more money even though they don't start at the largest firms, and then they stick it out and they're happier at the smaller firms than they might have been at the larger firms. And so I think that smaller firms can be a very, very good career move for people because the demands aren't as crushing. It just can be a better long-term choice of getting clients or working with people that don't have the same incredibly crazy expectations. And so they will have longer careers compared to people that are chasing, the highest paycheck. So if you're working in firms or in practice areas and things, and you're only doing it for money, but you may have an aptitude for it, you may be actually happier in smaller to mid-sized firms. And it's just, there's just places where you can have a lot more career longevity that are more stable for a career. Oftentimes, people start their career and they're in the wrong practice area. So attorneys may not be suited for certain practice areas. And one of the biggest mistakes that people often make is they will join a transactional practice area, which would be like real estate or corporate. They might actually be more suited for litigation or employment litigation or whatever, some type of litigation than they are transactional. And a lot of people that are in litigation type practice areas would be more suited for transactional work. And so you need to be in a practice area, either transactional or litigation, that aligns the most with your, skills and interest. And a lot of people go into corporate and real estate and things. Those are often, if you're at a top law school, people are kind of filtered into those because that's where the most demand is in places like New York and a lot of larger cities sometimes. And so they go into these practice areas, and they're really not as interested in as they might be, litigation, for example. And if they're in the wrong practice area and it doesn't motivate you, then you're not going to perform at the highest level, and you might, just be unhappy because of that. So it's not often just practicing law itself that makes people unhappy. It's the wrong practice area. And so how do you know you're in, the right or wrong practice area? Just this is something for you to think about. And it's a very simple example, but it's not often just about, being smart or hardworking. It's about a practice area that aligns with the type of person you are. So by the time, you're first, second grade or an elementary student or a middle school student, you're pretty quickly going to realize, what motivates you. Are you motivated by like math and science and things like that? Is that what you like? Is that what gets you excited? Are you more interested in reading, writing, history, and things like that? And there's just most people are one or the other. Some people will say they're both, but most people are a little bit motivated by one or the other, and they lean towards one of those. And this pattern will continue. So, what subjects were you taking? Were you taking economics and, accounting and things like that? Was that what you're interested in? And these sorts of preferences will really reveal the type of work you're, best suited for, and it's a clue of what kind of practice area you should be in. So, people that are like math and science and things like that probably should be doing a transactional practice area. And transactional practice areas, like I said, real estate and corporate, or tax, or trust and estates and things like that. And people that are like that enjoy writing very highly detailed things and transactions and documenting things and having very precise information. And attorneys that like reading and writing tend to enjoy writing arguments and debates and persuasive writing and things like that, and that motivates them. So these sorts of motivations will determine whether you're happy or not. So people that really enjoy reading and writing things, then they should be doing litigation type practice areas. And these inclinations matter, because if you enjoy reading and writing, you're going to continually be motivated by things. If you enjoy transactional type work, you're going to be motivated by that. So you need to have a practice area that aligns with your skills, interests, and talents. And sometimes it's just, a lot of people, like, you may have gone to school and been interested in health, or you might be interested in, I don't know, immigration or something. I mean, things that motivate, you have to be in something that motivates you. I see people all the time that go into the wrong practice area, like they're doing transactional practice work but not suited for it. So if they're doing a practice area that they're not suited for, then they're going to be unhappy. And you could be in the wrong practice area and conclude that you dislike practicing law when you should be in a different practice area. So you often have to change practice areas, and it's not easy to change practice areas, but if you want to change practice areas, you should try to do so sooner rather than later if something else motivates you than what you're doing. A lot of people think that they can, rest on their past achievements. And this is something that's very common among the people that went to the best law school. So they think that, because they went to a great law school or have this great background, it's going to help them throughout their career. So a lot of times people with those sorts of backgrounds will believe that they don't need to work as hard, that law firms are lucky to have them, and that their past achievements guarantee, future rewards, and they're going to succeed. And it's often, very common. People think that they can, that makes them good. And sometimes even there'll be firms that aren't very good that are, composed of people that went to the best law schools. I remember I had a litigation matter once in Texas, and I hired this law firm where all the people had gone to the very best law schools, but then at the very top of their class. But the firm didn't do well. It eventually went out of business. And the reason is the people had thought they were great, and they had these great educational pedigrees, but none of them were really that passionate about it. So they'd all left firms and gotten together and thought, we're really special because we have gone to all these top law schools, but they just weren't good at it. So they thought because of their pedigree, they should do well. So, you need to have a sustained commitment. You need to, constantly be able to work hard regardless of your past qualifications. And you need to make the right, career decisions. And sometimes people that went to the best law schools and did well think that they are superior and that will get, quickly, shot down. And the thing to realize is your pedigree will open doors, but, the only way you're going to succeed is if you work hard and you have humility and you're committed. And so, people, without great pedigrees succeed, and it doesn't really matter. And, it's just, these are just things that get you in the door. And the example that I like to give is, if imagine there's some sort of top football player and gets drafted into the NFL and thinks that he can, slow down because he was such a great, now he's reached the pinnacle of success. But, once he gets to this pro team, he's going to need to work even harder than ever. And so every time you get into a competitive environment, you're going to need to, you're just competing at another level. And that's where kind of, the real work begins. So, you always need to prove yourself and you always need to be better and get better and better. And the moment you stop doing that, you're going to be done. A lot of attorneys believe that they're going to succeed, and you can succeed doing this, but they believe that they'll succeed if they bill enough hours. And law firms like it when you bill hours because that's how they make money. And so it's definitely encouraged for you to bill a lot of hours at most firms, not all firms, but most firms, because law firms only make money if you bill hours. And so firms will give you this belief that if you bill enough hours, you're going to advance. Associates will make partner, often based on their billable hours. But if you, bill a lot of hours, people are making more money. And people believe that they can go someplace and bill a lot of hours and succeed. And, most equity partners when they'll leave firms or not do well because their contribution, the amount of business and stuff they have doesn't match the reward. Associates will, work incredibly long hours and never really be compensated or, based on the kind of effort they put in. But you can't have a long-term career just by billing a lot of hours. It's not gonna, it doesn't equal, for long-term career security. It's about a lot more than that. If you're, when you get senior, it becomes much more difficult to get work from partners, for example, because your billing rate's closer and partners make more money when they do the work, and the clients want partners working on things, not senior associates, close to the same level. So, people, will often be pushed out once their numbers decline. They can be pushed, the numbers can decline for a lot of reasons in terms of billable hours. It could just be the work slows down, whatever. But, if you're going to have a long-term career in most law firms, whether it's a large law firm or most, even mid-sized firms, most of the time you're going to only have success if you're able to figure out how to bill the most hours, if you're going to be able to get the right mentors, which are important. The mentors to sponsor and advocate for you. So who is your mentor? Your mentor should be someone that has a huge book of business. The larger the better, because those are the people that have power, not non-equity partners that may be telling you things, because those people aren't going to have the ability to make you partner. You're going to have to be able to not only bill hours, but get close to people that have influence. And so this is a thing that right now, what I'm telling you could save your career in a large law firm or whatever. But your mentors and the people that you get close to need to have the most power and the most business, because they're the ones that have the most pull. And people make this mistake all the time. I've seen so many people that were really high performers at really good firms. And when it came time to for them to be partner, they hadn't cultivated those sorts of relationships. And this is another important point that could save your career. So if you're someone that doesn't feel like you can, generate business, sometimes just getting very, very close to someone with a lot of business will help you. I was at this firm, Dewey Ballantyne, and there was a partner there that moved over from Paul Hastings, and he had, a huge book of business, like 50 or 60 million dollars. And he had three people that were partners that he'd made partner that he relied on for work and to work with his clients. And those people had been partners with him for, 20 plus years, but he was someone that was very powerful. So getting close to him gave them career security, whereas if they hadn't been close to him, they wouldn't. So you always need to try to have mentors or be close to people that have the most business. That's helpful. And so, if you're able to do that in addition to billing hours, that will help you. But ultimately, it's about relationships and it's about the right people, then it's about business. Because once you get business, you'll succeed. And law firms are not just places for associates and things to go to work for. What a law firm really is it's a platform for partners with business to succeed. And so the law firm essentially, if you have a lot of business, the law firm works for you. The law firm provides associates, the law firm provides office space, a brand and things. So you want to be in a position where the law firm's working for you. And that's one of the main reasons that people succeed. A lot of people think that they can succeed based on being on committees and all these different things and contributing in that way. Sometimes people will think, I don't know, but this generally doesn't work. Committees inside of law firms and the people that are often management things are often the partners that are least busy. They decide that they want to come into bureaucratic roles rather than try to, get a lot of business. And the law firms are what are called grinders, which are people that, there's three kind of things. Grinders are the people that do the work, and then there's minders that are people that watch them, which are the bureaucrats, and then there's binders, which are the people that go out and generate business. But, committees and things are not necessarily going to help you that much. The partners that are on committees are often the most likely to get pushed out. Same thing goes with associates. Sometimes, people will think that if they get on a lot of committees and stuff, they're going to add a lot of value. But ultimately, law firms don't reward just being on committees. They award people that are able to bring in business, that are doing the best work, that are billing the most hours, and that have the most powerful people behind them. And, some law firms will value committees more than others, but committees are not going to do anything to advance your career. The most important thing is your performance and contribution. And then this is another huge mistake that people make. And I would say, again, this is one of those mistakes that probably over 85% of people make, and it limits their career. People think when they're looking for jobs that they only should be applying to openings and a few select openings, and they think that there's something wrong with applying to a lot of law firms when they're looking for a job. And I will just tell you, like, just straight off the bat, that people that are able to like apply to lots of firms, like if they're looking for a job, they instead of just applying to 5 or 6 openings, they might apply to 100 firms that maybe don't have openings. They're going to be much more successful and find, places that match their interests, whether it's a cultural, the type of work, or people that, they're comfortable working with or whatever. They're more likely to find that when they apply to a lot of places because, ultimately what happens is law firms are businesses. And so law firms, if they have the work, will hire people to do the work because they make money. So a law firm doesn't necessarily need to have an opening. If you apply there and they have a lot of work, they will hire you because that's just how they work. They need people to bill hours, and so if you apply to a lot of places, you're more likely to get the right job. It's the same thing with partners. Partners can apply to a lot of firms when they have business and find firms that will give them better support or that will pay them more based on their business. I mean, so when you apply to a lot of places, you're more likely to succeed. I once worked with an attorney. I'll just never forget the story, and I've told it before, but she'd been unemployed for years and had all these health issues. I mean, some of them were, psychological. And because it was a man, it was a man, but I marketed him all over the country. After years of being unemployed and having these health problems, he was able to get a job that paid 50%. So they had plenty of work, and he billed out at like $500 an hour, and the law firm paid him 50% of the money that he collected, that, of the money that he billed. And so he went from unemployed to making like over $500,000 a year working for a firm when, just because he was able to apply to a lot of firms all over the country. So this sort of thing works. I mean, you apply to a lot of places, you're often able to find something that's absolutely perfect for you. I saw a woman that graduated from law school and was a solo practitioner and had never worked in a law firm and ended up getting a very good job in Fort Wayne, Indiana, working on very sophisticated mergers and acquisitions. She never would have gotten that had she, stayed in the small market she was in, like New Hampshire or something. She was able to suddenly get this position by applying to a lot of places. It just happens all the time. I remember, this is just, a quick aside about something that I did. I got fired from my federal clerkship and didn't have a job and decided that I wanted to work in Los Angeles. I had never been to California, much less Los Angeles, but I decided I was going to, apply to, one or 200 firms and just send them letters. And being unemployed without the bar, I got a position at Quinn Emanuel, and it was like 40 attorneys, but suddenly I got this clerkship bonus. I was given money to study for the bar. I got this, very high salary that was top of the market, and had a great, great experience. And then I ended up staying in Los Angeles, where I love. And so I never would have done that had I just not sent out, 100, 150 letters, whatever it was, to all the firms in Los Angeles. I just would have, I was stuck kind of in a small town. I didn't have a lot of options. Didn't have the bar, but I decided I was going to apply to a lot of places and got jobs. I mean, I got jobs at other firms too. So when you apply to a lot of firms or you apply to places in a lot of markets, you're gonna have options and things that you wouldn't have otherwise. And if you people sit there and they think, oh, I only need to apply to openings, I'm going to throw my, hat in with, on some opening I saw on LinkedIn or whatever, and think that that's a good job search strategy, but it's not. You need to really, when you're looking for a job, if you want to find the best job and you want to be in a place that has, the best culture and things, you need to be trying to talk to a lot of people. Just the basics here about looking at jobs in law firms, they don't hire just in response to job openings. If you send them a resume and they think that they have enough work in your practice area where, maybe they're billing, I don't know, maybe they have 10,000 hours worth of work in your practice area, but they're only, and maybe they have another 3,000 that they could do. If they have more attorneys, they will bring someone on. Or maybe just having additional attorney, maybe they don't have a lot of people in your practice area. I've seen recently like a lot of trust and estates attorneys applying to firms that don't have trust and estates practices, but they have a lot of clients that are asking for it. So they just hire opportunistically. So law firms don't need an official opening. It's just one of the most important things to understand about looking for positions. They do not need openings. The majority of placements that I make, meaning over 80%, are with firms that don't have openings. Why? Because law firms hire opportunistically. When you're applying to firms with openings, you're also competing with everyone else looking for a job. So in the questions and answers today, maybe I will show you how to do this, but you need to apply very widely if you want to succeed and if you want to find the best culture. This is just how it works. And people don't do this. They think it's a bad idea. Sometimes they'll think it's a bad idea. So you might go to like, for example, if you go to like, I'm not saying that this school does it, but if you go to like Wayne State in Detroit, and there's maybe 200 or 300 large to mid-sized firms. They don't want their entire class applying to all those firms and each firm receiving, 100 resumes from different students there. They will tell you to they will try to make you limit that because they don't want people doing that because it doesn't necessarily help the law schools. They want to make sure that they funnel certain people into certain types of firms. It's just how law schools work. So a lot of times law schools will not encourage this type of job search, and they'll tell you there are things wrong with it, or you feel that applying to firms is going to hurt your brand or something. But it doesn't. I mean, law firms are just businesses and they hire people in response to having work. So if you're looking for a position, the most important thing you can do is really to apply to a lot of places and also to apply widely, like not just in your market often, but in other markets. And in Los Angeles, there are over 10,000 law firms. There's so many places just in LA County that you could work. I mean, there's so many different places. So attorneys that are able to do that do well. People also believe that they should go to a law firm and have a lot of loyalty. And law firms are very secretive. Even partners don't know what's happening. Firms go out of business all the time. Firms will lay off all sorts of associates and let partners go, even without any warning. And, so things can always go wrong wherever you are. So people will often ignore these warning signs and will, and it'll be too late. By the time you're let go, often it's too late. So you have to be actively managing your career. And what that means is, you should always be looking at job sites and seeing what's available and getting a sense of your potential marketability. You should always doing whatever you can to maintain contacts. So you should try to have contacts with people you know at other firms, with your peers, with people that you meet. You should stay in touch with them. You should talk to recruiters. If recruiters are calling you, you should not hang up the phone. You should listen to what they have to say because they can save your life. Your colleagues can. And you should always realize that your security is going to be limited unless you have clients of your own. What does that mean? I remember when I started at Quinn, there was a guy that was hired that was kind of a senior associate with like 8 or 9 years of experience, and he'd worked at several firms before that. And he said the only thing he brought into the office was like one picture that was like kind of small on his desk because he realized that any moment, like someone could walk into his office and let him go, which I thought was kind of funny. But he kind of taught me that, wherever you are, you don't necessarily have security. So you need to realize that you need to always have, to manage your career, you need to have contacts outside of your own firm. You need to cultivate them, and you need to make sure that you have some sort of, security. So how do you realize when things are wrong at your firm and you could lose your job? Well, sometimes you'll see a lot of management departures. You'll see like the CFO of your firm leaving. You'll see other people leaving. Large groups of partners are leaving that have business. You'll see you won't be getting as much work. You'll have colleagues that that are asked to leave. And if you start seeing this stuff, you need to start looking for a position immediately. Because if you have like a gap on your resume where you're unemployed for a period of time, that's going to hurt you. It's going to make it much more difficult for you to get a position than if you're employed. Because if you were a firm, would you hire someone that's gainfully employed, that the law firm, or would you hire someone that is out of work and you don't know why they're out of work? Maybe they didn't do the best work. So if you're seeing things like that in your firm, you probably, unless someone is telling you that we're not going to lay you off and they're very clear about it, or you believe that you're in a position that's protected, you should always be exploring options, and you should always be aware of what other jobs are in the market. And if your firm, for whatever reason, you feel it's not stable, then you should be looking at other options. And when I talked about large firms earlier, large firms have very high expenses for associates and things like that. So they're not going to keep people around if the work slows down, if there's issues. And so you always need to be aware of what's going on in the market. If I call a partner, like at a major law firm, like a very powerful partner, they will almost always talk to me and try to learn what's going on and who's growing and what, whereas if I call an associate of like 1 or 2 years, they might hang up the phone. So, the smartest people are always trying to learn about what's going on in the market. Like you're one of the smartest people watching this because you're trying to learn about your career and what you need to do to succeed and not make mistakes. But just remember that in, a lot of law firms, things will go wrong. And when they go wrong, you need to be aware of them. I was talking to this guy that was a partner at this law firm with probably 30 or 40 attorneys, and he had maybe 10 partners and stuff, and they were getting ready to merge their firm into another firm. And he said something to me that I'll never forget. I said, "That's great. I mean, and I was talking to him about this, and I was trying to give him places where the firm could also merge and try to help him merge his firm. But he said something to me that I couldn't believe. So, keep in mind, maybe there's 10 partners and 30 associates, or 15 partners and 25 associates. He said, yeah, when we move, we don't need to take the associates. The firm we're moving into has plenty of associates. So literally, this firm was, merged into another firm, and all the associates and counsel and people without business were just abandoned. So, if you're in a situation where you think something like that's happening, or you hear rumors, and you need to start looking. People also will get attached to mentors. I talked about mentors earlier and how important they are for your success. If you're in a law firm, you always need to get close to someone that can protect you. And the person that can protect you is the person typically with the most business. And the person with the most business that you can have as a mentor, you should work and do everything that that person wants. You should be the right-hand person. You should be indispensable. And you need someone like that to be a partner. Most people that make partner in law firms have a very strong sponsor, and that sponsor has a lot of power, or they may have multiple sponsors, but you need to be close to someone. If you're in a law firm, that has the most influence, and those are the people that can help you to advance. So you can't just expect to sit there and do work and be protected from layoffs and not making partner. You need to be close to someone that has a lot of commitment and that's a lot of influence to help you advance. And mentors will have, and even partners have mentors. So partners have mentors that will give them work or introduce them to clients or protect them and all these sorts of things. But or they will take the person they will take people with them when they move to firms. But the best mentors typically are going to have a lot of business. They're going to be respected. They're going to have strong connections with other attorneys, with clients. Many people choose the wrong mentors. You may choose a non-equity partner. You may choose a mentor that doesn't have any business, or a mentor that continually moves around to different firms because they're having problems. And so you need to have mentors that can help you advance. And there's others that you will just work with that you won't have, they will have no intention of supporting your career. When I went to my second firm, there was this partner and that I worked for, and people would go and work for him directly. Like he would be the right-hand man, but he would keep them around only for like 2 or 3 years, and then he would stop giving them work, and then the person would leave. So that's not a good mentor. You have to find the right mentors. And I've seen attorneys that had mentors, and they might have been working for them for 10 years, and then when it came time for that person to make partner or advance, the mentor just kind of turned on them and stopped giving them work. Or sometimes there's literally people in law firms, like I said earlier, that you could be hired to work with, but those people will always be kind of pushed out after maybe giving 5 or 6 or 7 years of hard work. So you need to, what happened to people before me that were working for that person. But you need to really, if you're an associate or whatever your role is, you need to find the best mentor you possibly can, because that person will sponsor you, they will give you work, they will protect you from layoffs, and it's really the only way to succeed. So this is another huge mistake that people make, and if you make this mistake, it's going to make your career very difficult. A lot of people think that they can leave their law firm and come back later, and this just isn't the case. Like sometimes I mean, if you leave for maternity leave or something, you want to come back, but sometimes people just think they can just drop out of law firms for a while and then come back. But, law firms will hire people that are currently working in law firms, and they want the people that working there that are committed to working in law firms. They don't want people that are committed to doing other things or don't want to work in law firms. If you were a law firm, you would hire the person that is currently working for a law firm and committed to it. And that's just how it works. And, in a law firm in that practice setting, law firms have, unique cultures and rules, and there's a certain way, working in a law firm has a different set of expectations than other practice settings. And so if you're not coming from a law firm, and or you haven't been employed in a law firm and you left a law firm, you're too much of a risk. Either you want to work in a law firm or you don't. So if you do want to work in a law firm, you really you can't you should not leave. You should not quit. And you should not try to do something else, because it's just going to be very difficult to get back in. And this is another huge mistake that people make. They go in-house. And this is, in my opinion, one of the most risky and dangerous career decisions that people can make. And I'll tell you why. When you're in a law firm, you're a profit center. So they give you work and they make money, and they can make a lot of money. They can make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year from you if you're doing work for them. You're valuable to the extent that they have work. When you're in-house, you're a cost center. So they're paying you money. They don't always calculate the rewards you're giving them, and you may be the first to cut when there's issues. As a cost center, you're going to be exposed to layoffs when things slow down, when companies merge, when companies go out of business, which companies do all the time. When companies sometimes will just pick up and move their headquarters somewhere else and not bring everybody. I mean, all sorts of things can happen. There could be a new general counsel that comes in and they want their own people, or a new CEO comes in and they want to bring their own people. And so people that I see that go in house, now some people have very good long-term careers in house, and some people become incredibly successful and get stock options and all these things, and it works out for them. And I know one guy, a relative of mine, he was at Skadden, and he went in-house to some sort of private equity company and made millions of dollars and retired in his, mid 30s, literally retired. He doesn't know he's going to do something else, but, probably made $5, $6 million in a very short period of time. So you can do very well in-house, but for the most part, people that go in-house, what I see is they go in-house and they may be in-house for a couple of years and then just something happens and they lose their job and they're unemployed and they can't go back to law firms, and it's very hard to get jobs in-house. So imagine how difficult it is to get a job in-house after you've been in-house, because it may have taken you 2 years to get a good in-house job when you're in a law firm, and then you lose your in-house job. And where are you? You're in a position where it could take you 2 years to get a job again, but you're unemployed. So, the thing about law firms is they're everywhere. In BCG's database, we have over 100,000 law firms, and each week, like, I just want you to the scale of law firms. We're monitoring firms that go out of business and merge and stuff, but each week we're finding, 3 to 4 thousand new law firms. So we'll go into, a market, maybe we're in Oklahoma and we're able to find, 1,500 law firms there one week that were in our database before. I mean, there are law firms like they are everywhere, and that it's incredible. I mean, there are in every city of more than 25,000 people, there might be, 50 plus law firms in a city of 25,000 people. I mean, they are literally everywhere. And it's very easy to find a job in a law firm if you stick with it. And in-house jobs are much, much harder to find. There's just, the companies that have in-house legal departments typically, are mid-sized companies. They're often not smaller. It's harder to find an in-house job. In-house, if you're trying to get a job in-house, they actually prefer people that are coming from law firms many times because their skills are fresher. People that go in-house typically are hard to do work, but then in-house companies realize that it's often even more expensive when they bring an in-house attorney in, because not only are they paying the in-house attorney, but the in-house attorney will start trying to refer work to law firms because they don't want to do the work themselves. And so the in-house attorneys often become even more expensive than it would be to, have just refer the work out. This is something that I talk to CEOs and things all the time, and they tell me this, of like, mid-sized companies and things. And it's very interesting. But once you lose an in-house job, if you go in-house, it can often take you years to land another one. I was working with a guy that had been at Quinn Emanuel. He'd been there, that I knew, and he'd been there like 6 years. Or no, he'd been there like, started at another firm. So he'd been practicing in law firms like 10 years. He thought it was really smart. He went in-house and then he lost his job in-house. And keep in mind, this guy was, he'd gone to like University of Michigan Law School or something, had been on law review. I mean, he graded on a law review, very smart guy, and had been in law firms for 10 years. So he got this job in-house, and then he lost his job because the company merged or something after 2 years. And when I found him, he'd been unemployed for 2 years. He hadn't been able to find a job. And I did get him a job in a small law firm of like 5 or 6 people. It took a while, but I had connections and things. But at the same time, it was very difficult for him. He was able to get back into a law firm, but keep in mind, he's unemployed for 2 years before he found me. So, working in-house can be very, very risky. It often it's very scary because in a law firm, if you learn how to play the law firm game, you're making law firms money. When you're in-house, in-house companies go out of business all the time. Law firms, much, much rarely, because, people are basically sitting down, billing hours and making money. There's not a lot of overhead other than that. And if you have expertise and you can get clients, and there's a lot of stability. People will often base their career decisions on reviews. And so you will think that maybe you shouldn't be practicing law because of your reviews, or maybe you think that you should continue practicing law and will do well because of your reviews. What happens to most attorneys is they will go into a law firm, and in their first or second year, they'll typically receive negative reviews. Now, not everybody does, but the majority of them do. And the reason, and people take it very personally many times, and the reason you're receiving poor reviews is because you don't know how to practice law yet. You don't learn it in law school. You don't learn how to do things the way that law firms need them done. And so law firms will push you to improve and be more profitable and not make mistakes. And so they will try to make you become a better attorney. And you should become a better attorney and take this feedback. But a lot of people, their egos get crushed and they drop out of practicing law. Very, very common. People that go to top law schools, for example, will start at top law firms and they won't like the feedback that they're getting. And so they will quit or they won't improve in response to the feedback. So you get negative feedback. You should do everything possible to overcome that. And people do, most people, but a lot of people don't. And then what happens, it's kind of scary. So then you get into your third year. Law firms will often start giving you very, very good reviews. They'll tell you like you're on the path to being a partner. They'll give you very good reviews and make you feel good about yourself. But the reason they're doing that is when you're a young attorney, you typically don't know what you're doing. They're pushing you to do better. They're writing off your time. So a law firm that's paying you $300,000 a year out of law school may actually not be making very much money out of your work because they need to write it down. They need to write your hours off or whatever. But once you get to be, they need, and they don't like having to give you a lot of feedback. But once you become like a third year attorney, you typically know enough about what you're doing to handle matters and they're making a lot of money off you. You can do things without a lot of supervision. And they know you're going to work very hard to try to be a partner. So third year, fourth year, fifth year attorneys are very marketable, and law firms will often give them, very, very positive reviews. And because they can work with a lot of, supervision, they can make money. But, bad reviews, or good reviews can change very suddenly. So if the work slows down at your firm or different things happen, your reviews could suddenly turn irrationally negative, meaning they want you to leave, even if your performance hasn't changed. So they will walk in to your office and just give me 1 second. Sorry. Okay. They will walk into your office and, you start getting these horrible reviews, even if you're doing good work, because the law firm just doesn't have the work for you or whatever is going on. So even if your performance hasn't changed, so that can happen quite a bit. And then, by your seventh to 10th year, what will typically happen is then, your reviews will often, in large law firms, start turning, very negative, and they'll be doing that to push you out because they want you to leave because they may not have enough work for senior attorneys, which most law firms don't. So they'll start giving you a soft push. So you get negative reviews when you start. Then you have a period where you're coasting and making the firm a lot of money. You're getting very positive reviews and thinking you're doing well. And then suddenly you'll start getting negative reviews, which is, I mean, it's not funny, but that's just kind of what happens. And this is very kind of your how it works. And senior attorneys get negative reviews because they have high billing rates. Most clients, if they are paying a really high billing rate, would prefer to have the partner doing it, and not someone that's a senior associate. Partners make more money when they do their own work. So a partner may get, if they have a client, if they do the work for the client, they may get 30% of what they collect. And then if they give it to other attorneys, they may only get 5 or 10% or something. So partners prefer to do the higher billing rate, work themselves. They like to give work to mid-level associates because they can be more efficient. It looks good for the clients, but it becomes very difficult once you become a senior attorney to stick around. And if a law firm's work slows, you may often get bad reviews and think there's something wrong with you when there really isn't. They're just trying to, give you, push people out. And so law firms are strange, and they have rules that don't make sense. You have to kind of understand the context of your reviews. And then most people want to be in large law firms versus small ones, a lot of people. So I talk to attorneys, and I could call a partner at a middle market firm and tell them I have an opportunity in a major firm, and they will often be very excited about it. Attorneys judge each other based on the quality of firm they're at, and they feel better about themselves based on the quality of firm they're at. And they often feel superior to people that are not at the largest law firms. A lot of people think that they want to try to get into the most prestigious firms. A lot of people will believe, smaller firms are better based on what they've heard, about firms. So it's important to understand when, in your career, what the advantages and disadvantages are of different sized law firms. So, when you're in a large law firm, you're going to get access to the most sophisticated work. The work quality and things you're going to be trained to do is very, very high. There's going to be very formal systems. Large law firms are organized sort of like corporations, and they have all sorts of rules and things that they follow. They're going to make more money, you're going to have more prestige, you're going to be a part of a group that's much harder to get into. You're also going to be part of a group that's harder to advance. It has higher attrition rates where people that aren't the top performers are pushed out or don't have the drive. And so a lot of people get into these types of firms and they burn out and they leave the profession, entirely when they probably shouldn't. So like I said earlier, that, people that think they're better in large law firms, it's often not the case. If you go to a smaller law firm, either, earlier in your career or, you stay in a large law firm for 5 or 6 years, which isn't a bad idea, by the way, because you're getting training. It's going to make you often a much better attorney. Then you can take those skills and excel in smaller law firms. But if you're in a smaller law firm, you're often going to be happier. You're often going to earn a lot more money because you'll stick with the career. And so you have a much long-term, more earnings over the course of your career. You may have a lot of family time. Your kids may be much better adjusted. There are all sorts of, smaller markets. The biggest one I'd like to talk about is kind of upstate New York, because you go to work in Syracuse or Rochester and places like that, the hours are not as extreme. There's a lot of attorneys from that have come there from big firms in New York. They go home at normal hours. They go to their kids' sports games. They have houses that aren't that expensive but are nice. They have good lives. And, so you often can, be much happier in smaller markets or in smaller firms, because, working in the most prestigious firms is not always going to guarantee your happiness. And, smaller firms will often provide a lot more stability. The clients don't have to pay as much for the work, so the clients stick with them. Large law firms have to hold on to, large clients, and that's not easy all the time. And so, smaller law firms can provide a lot more stability and satisfaction. So you have to think about that. This is, another thing that I just want to bring up, and there's only 15 of these, so I'm almost done with the major reasons. But people will often think that, that their relationships are going to be stable if they are in a, in a law firm. And I see, when I see attorneys, most attorneys that I see have been, from large law firms have often, been divorced at least once, sometimes multiple times. And the reason is because, when you are in one of these very competitive environments, you're going to be working long hours. You're not going to be around your spouse. You're going to be stressed when you come home. You're not going to have the energy to give to your family and your significant other. And then they often get the people, their spouses often leave them, and their spouses often have affairs because the person's never home, they're not feeling loved, and all these sorts of things. And so if these are trade-offs, and what kind of relationships do you have? Are they solid? Or because this can cost you a lot. It can make you very unhappy. It can cost you relationships and so forth. And is the trade-off worth it? If you are, what happens a lot of times is people will work really, really hard for several years, and then they won't become a partner, and then their whole lifestyle will change. And when their lifestyle changes, the amount of money and stuff they're bringing in, then the relationships suffer because of money problems and things end. The other thing that people don't realize is, the stress and the habits and the health, working in a firm will often really hurt them. People that get into firms will often get into destructive patterns to deal with all the stress. They'll drink, or sometimes they'll overeat, and then they may not exercise, and so their health suffers. And people will have very serious alcohol and substance abuse issues. Often they'll have weight problems. Many times they will get cancer and have heart conditions and stuff. I know several attorneys that I've worked with in the past that were senior associates or became partner and died. I mean, a lot of them. I mean, imagine the number of people I've worked with. And I don't think none of that would have happened had they, put themselves in these kind of atmospheres and just not had limits in terms of what they would work. And it can have, great personal cost. And no one in a law firm is ever going to tell you often to slow down, because they're making money off your hours. And, so you have to decide if you're in the right practice, the right type of firm or right practice setting. Because if you don't protect your health, then no one is going to protect it for you. So, the most attorneys, some of the things I've talked about today don't have the sort of information to make the best career decisions. And many times, you may listen to what I'm saying, but ignore it. You are conditioned to, chase prestige and do what other people think about you, and stay kind of in a herd mentality. But this can make you often work in practice areas where you're unhappy. It can make you work in firms where you're unhappy. It can make you practice law when you shouldn't be practicing law. It can, make you put you, in a very bad situation. And, clients, will do things that for others and, instead of trusting their own judgment. And I've lost lots of money. I lost over $10 million once in a bad real estate investment because I just thought I had all the information myself and I didn't get advice from people. You know, I I made a decision to get into this real estate transaction. I did all these things I shouldn't have done because I didn't get outside advice, and I just, thought I should do things in a certain way, and I kept investing in something when it wasn't worth what I was putting into it, and I didn't get advice, and I didn't trust other people's judgment, and I put on blinders to ignore like what, was going on. So attorneys often will ignore all these things that I'm talking about today. Like they will be in the wrong profession or they will make assumptions and things that can hurt them. So my advice to you is to, do whatever you can to kind of understand what I'm talking about today and make sure that you protect your career and, don't make these mistakes that people make because most people make these mistakes. Most people go in house or most people try to work in the largest law firms for too long or they drop out of the practice of law or they don't put themselves in a position where they're protected by the most powerful mentors or where they're working for, they're doing something they're passionate about. And so, if you're not passionate about it, you shouldn't ignore that. And you should never, put on these blinders. If you think you should work in a law firm and you might be happier in another practice setting or do something else, you should do that. So these are huge mistakes. And what I'm talking to you about today, I mean, hope will, change the course of your life and make you do the right things and work in the right types of firms and be happy because most people don't do all these things and most people don't succeed because they're just not doing the right thing for themselves or they're not taking care of themselves. So I will take a quick break and then we'll take a break for like 1 or 2 minutes and then when I come back I will answer questions and any questions anybody has today and then I will be right back. Thanks. Just after a few minutes, a minute or two. All right, so we'll go to questions. Yeah, and so feel free to ask any questions you have. I think that, the questions I think are usually the most important part of the webinar because, people will ask things related to the webinar that may be relevant to them, or you can ask any questions that don't have anything to do about the webinar that you may like the answers to. So, and again, these, sometimes the questions can really change, the direction of your career and the choices you make. Let me just see here. Okay, questions. Okay, good. So I'll go to the first question. Okay. Hmm. Okay, first question. Why it's not pasting? Give me one second. It's not copying. Sorry, I'm having a problem here. Okay. Well, it's not letting me cut and paste. Let me just try one more thing. All right. Well, everyone should be able to see the question, I guess, even though it's not working. Let me just try one more thing. Okay. I figured this out. Give me one second here. Okay. So, first question. How do I negotiate a higher salary in a competitive market? So this is actually a very good question. Negotiating salaries, when you get offers and so forth. So I've seen over the past 2 weeks, I had one candidate that had been a solo practitioner for like the first 7 or 8 years of his practice. He still was a solo practitioner, and it's very difficult. He came out of law school as a solo practitioner, and I was able to get him a job with a law firm. And he got this job and he decided that he wanted to negotiate the salary a little bit. So I think they offered him 155 and he wanted to come back and make 180. And so I went to the firm and I said, this is what he would like to make. And they said, well, if he wants this kind of salary, then we don't want to have anything to do with him. We think we're giving him a really good opportunity. So this guy had been looking for a job for months or years, not through me, but through a few months through me, and the law firm withdrew the offer. And so I saw that happen to another woman the same week. Like it was kind of interesting. She was a workers' compensation attorney, and she got a position with a law firm that she wanted to get out of that practice area and she wanted to get into commercial litigation, which is very difficult to do. And she got an offer and decided that she wanted a higher salary, and the law firm withdrew the offer. A couple weeks prior to that, I saw a woman that was a customs law attorney, like international trade, and she got an offer and wanted to make even though she was making, like, let's say she was making $150,000 at her current job, she got an offer paying, I got her something paying like 210,000, and she'd heard that other people at her level at that firm were making 250,000, so she came back and tried to negotiate, and the same thing happened. So I think salary negotiations are, very dangerous. So if you have multiple offers, then, from different places, then yes, you can negotiate your salary because you have other options. But if you get an offer someplace where the work's better, where it's something that you want to do more for whatever reason, you're actually better off usually not negotiating the salary, because law firms will withdraw offers when you do that sometimes. But law firms, you can negotiate salaries, but you have to just be very, very careful about how you approach it, because if you approach it in the wrong way, usually it's the smaller firms that get offended. If you approach it in the wrong way, and the law firm feels that there's a lot of other people that can do the same work that wouldn't require that higher salary, then they can negotiate the salary. So, I mean, they can withdraw the offer. So, how do you negotiate it? You approach them and basically say, could I get this extra amount of money when you get the offer? And they will often just say no or yes, or you can ask them questions about, like, how would my salary advance if I do a good job over the next 6 months or over the next year? You can ask questions like that often, but law firms do get offended. So I would, if you get a job that's much better than you have right now, and the law firm is paying you a certain salary, you're probably 50% of the time, I would recommend you have to be very, very careful negotiating salaries. So, like I said, the way I would typically do it would be to ask, how will my performance be evaluated? Will my salary increase after a certain length of time, and that sort of thing? And you can do that. Sometimes I negotiated a higher salary for a woman for a law firm. She was working in New York, and there was a mid-sized law firm that was from, I think, Buffalo, that was opening an office in New York, and she was going to be the first associate hire. They wanted to pay her the same salary that they paid in Buffalo, which was, significantly less, and so they made her that offer, and then I went back to the firm. And I made the case that, it's a different cost of living and so forth. And they ended up increasing her salary. So you can negotiate salaries, but it's something, that I would recommend being very, very careful about in many cases, unless you have other options. And law firms, typically, if you're asking for, an extra $20,000 a year or something, in reality, that's probably not a lot of money for law firms. But when you're negotiating a salary, you have to be, very careful. And typically, you don't want to ask for a salary that's higher than other people. If there's other people at your class level, meaning, say you're a 2024 graduate and the law firm is paying $100,000 to all 2024 graduates, and you come in and you say you want 120, they're never going to pay you more than existing people are making at that class level. So you just, you can't do it. I mean, if one person in a class level, if they have five people in your class making 100,000 and one person wants 120, then all of a sudden they may have to give, people will not know your salary is higher, they'll have to pay everybody a higher salary, so they won't do it. Okay, what steps should I take to become a law firm partner in 10 years? Well, I mean, the big thing I talked about earlier was you either, you get a very powerful sponsor that can help you, that has a lot of work that they can give you. You work the most hours in your law firm. So certain law firms will make people a partner even without business, that build the most hours, or you get business. And so law firms will typically only make someone a partner if that person is providing a lot more, if they have to make you a partner, meaning you're making the law firm so much money that if you leave and do something else, they won't make you partner. I had a candidate just last week that was an associate in a law firm, and I got him another position, and the other position paid, like, I don't know, $75,000 more than he was making. He told his law firm that he was leaving to take this other position, and they were like, Wow. So they actually matched the salary that the firm I got him, had made him an offer to. And then not only that, but they made him a partner. So from their standpoint, they had so much work, they needed his expertise. He'd worked very hard there. They couldn't function without him. So they made him a partner. I have a candidate that I spoke to yesterday that works for a firm doing real estate and in a very rich part of, like, an island basically that's on the East Coast. There's an island where people have a lot of money, and he does real estate work for them, and they have, like, way more work than they can handle. And so he's in a position where if he leaves or if he stays, they'll probably make him a partner because they need, there's not a lot of people that want to work on this island, and they need him. So law firms will typically make you a partner if they have to. And it could be because you're the only person that does the type of work that they have. It could be because you have business. But the big thing to remember is people will typically only give you something if they have to. Should I choose a summer associate position based solely on salary or firm prestige? Yes, people should try to work as a summer associate in the best possible law firm they can. The reason for that is that it sets you up to get jobs at other large law firms if that's what you want to do. Summer associate position is going to pay you a lot, which is good. I mean, that gives you money to put towards your loans. A summer associate position in a top firm is going to make you more marketable to other large law firms if you want to do it. It's going to make you more marketable to mid-size and smaller law firms if that's what you want to do. So any law student should always try to get the best possible job, the best law firm they can during their summers, because it's something that maybe, less than 5% of attorneys can do. So it does help you. Working in a large law firm right out of law school also helps you because you're able to get very good training. You're able to look at things in a much deeper level, and learn how to practice law at a very much higher level, not make mistakes. The reason to work in large law firms out of law school is typically, and it is, if the smartest move you can make if you can handle it for 4 or 5 years. The reason is because large law firms represent large clients, and those large clients have often, very large budgets or even unlimited budgets. So the attorneys that work in the largest law firms are able to get the ability to work very, very deeply into issues, to understand things in a lot of different perspectives, to have clients that will pay for that. They'll pay for lots of research, and they'll pay for, working very hard in matters. And so once you learn how to do that, you become a better attorney by being exposed to that. But it doesn't mean you should stay in a large law firm forever. You have to, if it's not something for you, you have to leave at some point. But yeah, you should try to work as a summer associate in the best possible firm you can, the most prestigious firm that you can, because that's going to give you a lot of very good training, a lot of options later. What's some of the most common career mistakes attorneys make that lead to poor long-term retention in law firms? Well, the most common mistakes are often, staying in firms and practice areas you're unhappy with, to go to firms where you're not getting any type of work-life balance, to go to firms where you're working with people that you don't like, all those sorts of things. So people will not stick with it when they're working with firms, that they're just, unhappy. How can I sacrifice work-life balance as a litigation attorney without sacrificing career growth? So work-life balance as a litigation attorney can depend on the type of work you're doing or the type of firm that you're with. If you are in litigation, doing any type of litigation, cases go to trial. There's deadlines for filing things. There's all these pressures that have to be met. You can't ignore filing deadlines. You can't, if you're going to trial or something, you have to work very, very hard. This is just how it works as a litigation attorney. So, if you want to have work-life balance, there are, smaller firms that don't have as many cases, that where you can't work as many hours on behalf of the clients because the clients don't have the budget. But in most cases, I mean, anytime someone's a litigator, there's going to be times where you're very, very busy, and you have to basically be there for the client, and you can't you just have to do that, and it's not really negotiable because if someone was representing you, like you had some sort of issue that you had an attorney representing you for, you wouldn't want that attorney concerned with work-life balance because you wouldn't get good results. You would want the person that's willing to work very hard on your matters. So people that want work-life balance will often go into practice areas like, trust and estates is one. You can, have a pretty decent work-life balance doing that. There's certain practice areas you can go into where you can have work-life balance, and then there's ones where you don't. I was talking to a surgeon about a week ago, and he was telling me about kind of work-life balance in the medical profession. Like the most in-demand people that want to get the residencies, the hardest jobs to get when you're in medical school to get training in to be that type of attorney is dermatology, because people want, you can make a lot of money in dermatology, but also it's something where you can go home like at a normal hour, you work 9 to 5 or whatever, and it's a good job with a good lifestyle balance. So it's actually even more competitive than being a surgeon. And if you're a surgeon, you have to get up in the middle of the night most of the time and do work, and it can be a very, very difficult profession. So, you have to decide kind of what practice area you want to be in if you want work-life balance. It doesn't mean that you have to not practice law. It just means that you have to find the right practice area. And again, you can do litigation at smaller firms where there may not be as many demands, but anytime you're doing litigation, there's always going to be times, where things, are not easy. So what are the pros and cons of moving from private practice to in-house counsel role? The pros are that you most of the time will have fewer hours and a better lifestyle. You can go into places where there may be stability in an in-house role. There are in-house companies that have a lot of stability in their there, and you could have maybe more stability than you would have in a law firm if you choose the right in-house job. But you'll be able to work for one client and not many clients, so you'll be able to get deep into the problems. You will often work directly with CEOs and other people that are making very important decisions and have a role in that, and advise them and feel good about that. You will help the company avoid problems. You will often be in a position where you get things like stock options, which will potentially make you very rich. You can often get retirement benefits that are very good, and some companies, when you retire, will give you health insurance for the rest of your life. There's all sorts of benefits to going in-house, but the cons are, like I talked about earlier, that most of the jobs in-house don't last very long because companies go out of business. Companies have serious financial problems when their products or whatever aren't working. Companies go out of business much more often than law firms. Law firms very rarely go out of business, but in-house companies do. You're going to have less stability when you're in-house than you would have when you're in kind of in private practice many times. When a new general counsel comes in, or a new CEO comes in, they'll often want their own legal department. When you're in-house, your skills will often deteriorate because what happens is in-house role companies will refer a lot of work out. So instead of doing the complex work yourself, you'll refer it out. So your legal skills will deteriorate a lot. There's often a lot more politics involved in-house than there are in law firms. Law firm companies will, when they have an in-house counsel, they'll often want the in-house counsel to help them bend rules and do things that may not technically be kosher, or even legal in some matters. And that's what the in-house counsel's job is, to figure out how the company can bend rules so they can make money. So the CEOs and everyone that are working with in-house counsel, they'll want their attorneys to help them do things that may not be completely ethical many times. So the in-house counsel needs to really be able to figure out how to do that where they may not be comfortable with what the company's doing. So people go into in-house roles all the time, and they get there and they're like, oh, this is slightly illegal what the company's doing or whatever. And then they don't support the CEO and everybody that's trying to do that. And so the in-house, they'll get pushed out. So that's just a very big thing that kind of happens there. Is it a mistake to wait until the 3 year to start networking seriously? So you should always try to, when you're in law school, you should try to be likable and seen as someone that works hard, and try to maintain relationships and positive relationships with the people you're in law school with and be liked by them. And to the extent you can, even be a little bit social, those people will, become another, go to law firms where they can, where you potentially could get jobs there if you network with them. They can become in-house counsel different places and people that would give you work in the future. So networking with law students that you're in school with is very important. I remember John Quinn, who started Quinn Emanuel, he was giving a presentation at one time about how to generate business. And he said that one of his biggest mistakes was he was at Harvard Law School and he felt like he didn't network enough and make, solid relationships there because a lot of those people became, companies that could have given heads of companies in terms of the in-house, departments that could have given him work. So you always want to try to get along with the people you're in school with your fellow associates inside of law firms, because they will go into places where they could give you work. So, networking to the extent you can with them is important. And then, trying to start a network because networks can help you. And honestly, I think there's some sort of statistic out there then, that, a lot of majority of people that get jobs get them often through networking. So, networking with positively people is important. And then, being able to network, once you are an attorney is important. Can you say something why it's dumb to argue with people on social media and write things that you could regret later or need to hear it? Would you answer this question live? So people, law firms, when they hire people, will look at their social media often before they hire them. If they don't like what they see, they won't hire you. If you're at a law firm and you start saying things that could be construed in the wrong way in social media, then people won't like that either, and you can lose your job. So it's not a good idea to write a lot of stuff on social media that could be taken the wrong way. I mean, right now, like there's like a lot of tension with people taking the side of Palestine versus, Israel and things. And so, there are people that are just diehard fans of Israel, like Israel can do no wrong. And there's other people that think the opposite. So, taking positions on these different issues could be very inflammatory. You could take issues about different things, that would be maybe against a client's interest that a client wouldn't like to see. Clients will look you up on social media. So you have to really, social media, if you're an attorney, is not a place to make enemies and take sides on things. Lawyers should be able to represent someone that's pro-Palestine versus pro-Israel without that, you represent a client, they may be pro-Israel and you may be for Palestine. So you have to, or you may be a very serious fan of Republicans or a very serious fan of Democrats, and you take sides on that, and it could alienate you from, different clients. I mean, unless you have, partners with a lot of clout and stuff can do that, but you have to be very careful. You don't want to take sides in issues because it can hurt you. And people, there's people that are Democrats that absolutely hate Republicans and vice versa. So you have to be very, very careful about that stuff. Why would you take sides on an issue and on social media and make a big deal about it when you're going to potentially alienate people in your own firm or alienate, potential clients? It's not smart. How can an attorney with almost 2 decades of practice get around poor grades as they pursue law firm opportunities? So law firms don't care about your grades. The only time they care about your grades for the most part is when you're in law school, because it's the only thing that they have to compare you to other attorneys from your law school and other law schools. So that's the only time grades are really that important, because how, if you're a law firm and there's two people that you're looking at from University of Minnesota Law School, and one person is in the top 10% of her class, and the other person's on the top 50. The person with the best grades is, if you have to evaluate two people, you're probably going to hire the person, if you like them, with the best grades. So that's just the only time it really matters. If you've been practicing law for more than a few years, the only thing they really care about is your experience in the practice area. It's very rare, by the way, for the only people that really will request transcripts for the most part after an attorney's been practicing a couple of years are the largest law firms. They still care about it, but in most cases they won't even care about it after 2 or 3 years. Law firms only care about your grades really when they're evaluating you for the first time. I had a woman who's very funny, just back to University of Minnesota Law School for whatever reason. She was at University of Minnesota Law School and had like pretty much all C's and just not good grades at all. And somehow, I don't know how she did it, but she got a clerkship with a federal appellate judge. And she also had somehow written on law review, even though she had C's. And so she had law review and she had the University of Minnesota Law School. I mean, she'd gotten the circuit court clerkship. And when she was done with a clerkship, she would apply to a bunch of firms in Los Angeles, and she got positions with, actually, no, it was in Silicon Valley, but she got positions with two of the top firms in Silicon Valley, and they never asked for her grades. And then a couple of years later, she came back to work with us, and and then for a couple firms that she applied to did ask for her grades, and obviously she didn't get jobs, but your grades are just something, people do not care about your grades really when you get out of law school and you've been practicing for a few years. The only thing they care about is your practice area and often, the caliber of firm you're working at. So the law firms, it's not something that you need to worry about, after you've gotten out of law school and have some experience. Okay, next question. Oops, sorry about that. Sorry. How can law firms identify candidates who are likely to make career limiting mistakes? Well, one of the most important ways for law firms to evaluate candidates, I think, is after they've been out of law school for, a few years. I mean, are they moving firms too much? So people that are moving firms too much are probably going to move again. Attorneys that are likely to make career limited mistakes, you can often look at their resumes and see that they have a lot of interest in other things rather than practicing law. So those sorts of people, like if their resume stands out as something that looks much more suited to doing something else, like for example, I don't know, they have a they've worked only, I don't know, they worked in another profession for a long time. Like one of the things just an example is I saw a woman that had been in all these entertainment societies, had worked in entertainment prior to going to law school, had been on an entertainment law journal in law school, and then had gone to a large law firm and had been there, and then had moved to another large law firm. And she was always looking for entertainment jobs. She didn't really want to be doing corporate law in a law firm. She wanted to do entertainment. So seeing someone with a background that's very, very strong in something else, that they're obviously much more interested in something else, is an example of someone that's likely to make a career limited mistakes. Okay, what are the biggest mistakes that attorneys make when switching law firms in mid-career? So I think the biggest mistakes that people make are typically related to going to firms that are very similar to the ones they're at. If they're not happy at their existing firm, they go to something that's very similar where they're going to probably have the same results and the same experience. So if you're switching firms in mid-career, you should be going to a place where you feel like you're going to have, where you feel like you're going to be able to succeed, where you feel like you're going to be able to stick around there for, to the time you make partner, where you feel like the type of people you're around culturally match the type of personality that you have. So every firm has its own culture. So you should be going into a place where you're comfortable with the culture and the people, because if you're comfortable with the culture and the people, the law firm's more likely to keep you around than if you're not someone that kind of matches their culture. And there are law firms where people are just not good fits for the culture. So if you're not a good fit for the culture, then you're probably not going to do well. If you go into a firm where you don't feel like you're going to succeed, or where you're not very interested in the work and where it doesn't motivate you, you're probably not going to do well. So often going to a firm that's very similar to the one you're at is not a good move. If you want to get into or get exposure to a different practice area, but you go to another firm where you're not going to get that, that's a mistake. If you go to a firm where people are don't tend to succeed there in the long run, or people, you're not going to be able to stay there, that's a mistake. So anytime, when you're mid-career and you have, and I'm wondering if this is mid-career, when you're associate, or if it's mid-career when you're a partner. But, typically you want to go into a place, anytime you go into a place mid-career, you really should be looking at asking yourself, is this a place I can see myself staying for like the next 10 or 15 years? And if it's not, that could hurt you. Does choosing a legal specialty too early limit my future options? Yes. So most of the time when you go into a certain practice area, whatever the practice area is, you're going to get training in that practice area. So whether it's corporate, litigation, whatever that is, insurance, defense. And so once you go into that practice area, the only practice area that you're really going to be marketable to in the long run is that practice area, like not necessarily other practice areas, like because law firms will only hire people if you're like a third year attorney and you're looking for a job. A law firm's looking when law firms have openings, they're going to look for people that have experience in that practice area. They're not going to hire people that are in that practice area. So if you're a corporate attorney, you've been doing that for 3 years, and all of a sudden you want to be a litigator and you start applying to those jobs, well, the law firm is going to hire people that have experience doing litigation rather than corporate. So it's very difficult and it's kind of sad that when you're in law school and you get your summer jobs or you get your first job, people will often take the first job that they get. And it could be in a practice area that doesn't match their interest, or it could be in a practice area that limits them. So how do you fix that? Well, the smartest thing you can do when you're a young attorney is if you want to do a certain practice area, you think a certain practice area matches your interest, then, instead of just applying to firms in one city or taking the first job you get, you should be doing a very extensive search. You should be looking at jobs in as many markets or firms that do the type of work you want to do in as many markets as possible, because wherever you get your early experience is probably going to have a lot to do with what happens to you and the long run, in terms of your marketability later on. So doing one type of practice area is what you're probably going to get hired into. So you need to be careful about the practice area you choose initially. Okay, very good presentation. Can we download this PowerPoint slides? This is available to watch again online. How could I get personalized career counseling? I'm just starting out. Yeah, so this webinar will be put up on the BCG site under the webinars probably within a week. So you can rewatch it there. And I think the PowerPoint slides are also there. And then in terms of personalized career counseling, I think that these webinars are helpful, so you should watch them. And then there's a lot of articles and things that I've written and other webinars that are pre-recorded that you can watch that would probably help you. See. Any specific hacks for attorneys who are mothers of small kids? Thank you. So yeah, so law firms respect, now in this particular point in time, they do respect mothers. They will often give you, extra time and so forth. I mean, they'll allow you to have flexible schedules. So you should try to work with a law firm that allows that. But, if you're a mother with small kids, sometimes you can work in law firms that will let you work remotely and have time during the day and so forth. But it really kind of depends on, you have to be able to find law firms that will kind of give you those options, or you have to just, stick with a law firm. Let me just see here. Let me just see. Okay, this is great. So someone says they enrolled in the Big Law Breakthrough course. So I do have a course. Oops, I made a mistake here. I do have a course called Big Law Breakthrough. I will post it. I don't have the URL for it here, but there's a lot of very helpful information on there about the stuff I covered today. And I don't have the URL for it right now, but I will post it in the next webinar, give people access to that. So the last question I think I have is, what are the things to look for when a partner is making a lateral move? So partners making a lateral move need to look at the level of support that the firm's giving them. What is, what support, how is the law firm going to support my book of business? How is the law firm going to help me develop business? Am I comfortable with the partners that I'd be working with? How am I going to be compensated? Am I comfortable with that? Is the law firm going to give me a base, and then how are they going to compensate me for my business? Does the law firm have the sort of brand that will enable me to attract clients? Will the law firm, help me develop business? All those sorts of things. So most partners, have a pretty good understanding, have the ability to ask those sorts of questions. But a partner with business is typically looking for the law firm that's going to support its clients and make it easier for the partner to bring in more clients and do, and refer work to people. Are they comfortable with the other partners that they're working for? Service partners need to look for a law firm that hopefully has, a lot of stability for them. Okay, well, thank you everyone for being in the webinar. And And thanks for the questions. I hope this information was helpful. Again, just understanding a few things that I talked about today could, really hopefully dramatically change the course of your career. And, working in law firms, by the way, is a very good career decision. The reason is because it's really the career decision where you can really, have the most long-term success. If you are able to find the right environment and follow a lot of the rules I've given you today, you can really people practice into their 80s. So finding the right platform, the right practice area, the right people to work for, the right mentors, and everything you can do very well. Or maybe you shouldn't be practicing law, like I talked about earlier. So thank you, everybody, and I will be back next week.